Abay. This must be the most famous name in Kazakh literature, and not merely in literature. It sounds familiar due to numerous toponyms, names, symbols, and monuments associated with this name. As for toponyms, we can easily find the Abay Street in literally every city, Abay Avenue, and even Abay Monument. Moreover, there are 2 villages named after Abay in the Kyzyl region only. Abay has become a brand, and many people use his wisdom while discussing different things referring to his glorious Book of Words, or Kara Zozdir. And both parties would think that their opinion and interpretation of his words is the right one. Biknur Kisikov, writer, author of numerous novels, stories, and poems, member of jury of literature contests, inspirer and organizer of Kitab Fest Festival, founder of Kazakhstan Encyclopedia Project, encyclopedia.kz. Reread Abay, you brainiac. Read his Book of Words, and you might become even smarter, one might say to his opponent, dropping casually this glorious name. We love name-dropping, indeed, and Abay's name has all rights to be considered as great. In digital age, Abay has become the most digital writer in Kazakhstan. His works can be found literally in every online library. Even the App Store and Play Market feature an app called Kara Zozdir, and it was downloaded more than 100,000 times. For have I lived good or bad, I overcame a lot, in struggles and quarrels, trials and arguments, sorrows and worries. I aged and I am old. Abay's recognizable profile is quite often used in demotivational posters. Once you go online, you might think there's too much of him there. Abay has inspired the appearance of many new terms and concepts. Apart from Abay studies, we hear things like neo-Abayism, to play Abay, and even a verb like to abay. That is the way internet users can call someone who is being over-edifying. All of this proves how popular this great philosopher still is. It might not necessarily increase the number of readers, but it definitely draws people's attention to his Book of Words. However, it is impossible to scale the greatness of this figure with the Book of Words only. Abay, well, he has always been seeking for an alternative of negative alternative. He was thinking a lot about how to preserve humanity, about how in the 20th century he can save and support his people, their culture, language, and music. At the same time, he was the person who, back then, was needed badly, someone who could speak about these matters in Kazakh steppe manner, who could always raise worrying issues, how to mobilize spirit and human consciousness in order to battle upcoming adversities. And of course, he was a great poet. That very technology he used. He wrote about people, about soul, love. He defended youth, and they were making notes of his poems. The best gift at any wedding were Abay's verses. People from all over the steppe were visiting him, and after their visit, they would distribute his poems and songs. This persona had an incredible influence on history. He was a polyglot. He knew Arabic, Persian, and other Middle Eastern languages. He was reading works of Middle Eastern classics, Navoy, Ferdowsi, Nizami, Saadi. He wrote more than 170 poems and made about 56 translations. Influenced by Eastern poetry, he wrote amazing poems, The Tale of Azim, Mazgud, Iskander. Iskander, this is Abay's epic poem written by him under the influence of Iskander Nameh poem. Iskander, or Iskander, that is how Alexander of Macedon was called in the Middle East. Some would also call him the Two-Horned. Apparently at that time, horns signified power. Figure of Alexander the Great was very popular in the Middle East. There were numerous tales, legends, and poems featuring him. Abay followed this tradition, but with a twist. In his poem, Alexander the Great is a jealous, greedy, and cruel conqueror, whereas Eastern poets usually were glorifying the man. In Abay's work, Alexander is followed by Aristotle, his wise mentor, whom Abay respected enormously. It might even seem that the whole poem was dedicated to this Greek philosopher. The Kazakh writer honored Aristotle and was familiar with his works. The philosopher and his naughty disciple embark on a journey in an attempt of conquering the world. On the road, they argue about morale, good and evil. They talk about global issues of the universe until they find themselves in front of the gates of some lost mountainous city. The guard approaches them and hands them a bundle with an orbit bone. The philosopher and the conqueror decide to weigh it because the guard is claiming that the bone is the heaviest thing on the earth. On the one side of the balance scale, they put the bone, and on the other, their swords and armor. However, the bone outweighs everything. Then one of them decides to put a handful of soil on the scale, and suddenly it outweighs the bone. This heavy bone has made Alexander the Great realize everything turn around. The poem condemns his conquest, his violence, greediness and glory hunting, his cruelty. Man on an evil path will eventually face his death. In this poem, Alexander has realized that fully and is full of remorse. Abay was also an innovator. He introduced new feet, rhymes, and meters into Kazakh poetry, like sestina and ottava rima. But I'm curious about not only his poetic or philosophical legacy, but also a musical one, because Abay was a composer as well. He composed more than 20 tunes that are still popular in modern Kazakhstan. He was even composing music specifically for his poems. I'm sure you all heard a song called Kozimnim Karasi that is played at every single celebration. It was Abay who composed it. This song was performed by many prominent artists of modern time, from Alibek Nishev to Kazakhstan's pop king, Kairat Nurtaz. And this is the biggest proof of the fact that Abay is still popular today. But how was he perceived by his contemporaries? Of course, he was considered as a scholar, as an intellectual, but many have also critiqued him mercilessly. They would say that Abay was lazy, careless, and that his only hobby was literature. Son of a rich man, people would say. Of course, in severe conditions, the Great Steppe, where there was no electricity, gas, or central heating, people were preoccupied with survival problems. They wouldn't think of literature. That's why creativity was a privilege of a small group of people who didn't need to bother themselves with trivial life issues. Things are not different today. Creativity is hardly ever a decent source of income. Abay was a good and a smart man, but definitely not a role model. His father, Kunanbay, was a great man, a true leader who did a lot for his people and a real exemplary man. He is perceived this way by many, However, Abay was just a good person who would write down some clever thoughts and nothing more. Indeed, Abay's image remains controversial even today. People used to call him lazy and careless. Today, some are claiming that had he lived in modern time, Abay would make a great blogger and nothing else. They advise us to be inspired by other people, proactive, charismatic, those who have proved their success with their deeds. People like Batirs, warriors and warlords. And Abay, he was always full of sorrows and, allegedly, has never finished a single thing he was doing. The man couldn't even manage his village, people say. Of course, this is somewhat doubtful. Abay has become a poet once he turned 40. Before that, he worked as a Volos governor, managing several villages. So despite what people say, he was working as a manager for some time. And calling him lazy is not fair too. He studied hard. He was translating, writing things. He knew several languages. All of these requires colossal efforts. On the other hand, it can be a good trend if a person like Abay can be critiqued. The problem with our classics is their sanctity. Any criticism can be perceived as a personal offense. It is almost impossible to find a person in the world literature who was respected as much as Abay is respected among Kazakhs. It is fair to say that Abay is like Goethe for Germans or Socrates for Greeks. Excerpt from Ilyas Jansurgurov's autobiography. Once in 1914, I came across a Kazakh newspaper. There was a feature about Abay called The Most Important Kazakh Poet. It was the first time I heard about him. I wanted to get hold onto his book so much. In the article, it was said that the book can be bought in Semey, in Kopbay Bayselu's shop. 1 year after, I wanted to purchase grain, and at that day I stayed overnight at my school friend Sota Karabay's place. In conversation, he mentioned that he can get me the book for 1 tenge. I took 70 tiyuns from the money my father gave me for grain. Then I sold a sack for 30 kopecks more and begged my friend to buy me the book. It was the first edition of Abay. I was reading it while riding a horse and I was overwhelmed with joy. Abay has influenced me immensely. My conscience awakened. I started to binge read. My life became easy. I felt as if I was shaken. I was feeling the changes around me with my whole heart. I had an immense desire to write, good or bad, but I was writing all the time. So, who would Abay be has he been our contemporary? Blogger or poet? Social networks live in their own tempo. Internet does not approve of long moralizations and especially edifications. Of course, some bloggers write in this genre, and they are being constantly condemned for that. Social media popularity today is all about hype and scandals. There is no place for morals. That's why, in order to become a blogger, Abay would have to change his writing style. Abay, we know, wouldn't fit in the social media world. Of course, some internet users would still follow him and even quote, but in the time of clip thinking, people wouldn't be able to enjoy his greatest at its fullest. Abay was a great fit in his own time, but wouldn't be today. However, cultural and spiritual heritage of his works is still relevant today. It helps us to connect to primordial steppe wisdom that we have lost at some point in our history. Time flies just like wind, driving the waves of generations, and where? To the great shore of happiness.